This is a contentious issue, so we've had a look ourselves. Conducted some research to find out how many countries still make use of a school uniform. Now, the gold on this map shows that in most parts of the world, the majority of them still do so, and it is, of course, a real relic of colonialism, some form of uniform. Many of these represent military, navy, and colonial attire. Yes, in many African countries, families can't afford the uniform. However, children will go to school in similar colored clothes. Some may avoid school if they can't afford the uniform. In Asian countries, a uniform is a symbol of pride, adopted mainly from the British. Even in the Middle East, some form of uniform with religious attire has been adopted. There are, of course, countries in Europe that have school uniforms. However, the regulations are very relaxed. Even in Britain, with only Catholic schools still very strict on the continent with regards to uniform. In green, you see the majority of schools in these countries do not have uniform. European and Nordic countries don't have uniforms at all. This is due to their harsh history, where uniforms, of course, were associated often with war and even the Nazi era we see in Germany. Something interesting, the UAE and Russia, they brought back their uniform rule just 3 years ago. Interesting take on it. We can confirm that some of the best, yes, some of the best schooling systems in the world don't have a uniform. So there's no direct correlation between discipline, work, and uniforms. It simply does not work. That's the tail of the tape, as it were, but let's go over to Elvis now to continue the discussion around, well, the cost firstly, but also is it still necessary?
Well, Eben, school wear is a major part of South African life. All public schools and nearly every private school in South Africa has some form of a uniform or school uniform, one way or the other. The Competition Commission, as you heard, says that it has received nearly a dozen complaints from parents forced by schools to buy uniforms from selected suppliers. Now, that's a practice that's prevalent in both government as well, mainly former Model C and even private schools. The Department of Education is responsible to set the guidelines on school uniform. The purpose of the guidelines is to ensure that practices related to school uniform do not impede access to education in any manner and do not infringe any constitutional rights of persons. From the Department of Basic Education, we have the Director of Education Management and Governance in Schools, Mr. James Ndlebe. Very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
First and foremostly, we heard, I don't know if you watched the insert a little bit earlier, in fact, the interview we had with the Competition Commission. They are investigating this case of collusion between some schools and suppliers, and some parents are complaining that school uniforms are becoming unaffordable. What's your take on that?
Yes, we have been working with the Competition Commission in this matter, and it's true that school uniform is becoming unaffordable, and it makes the whole system of education very expensive and unaffordable.
Mm-hmm. There are people that believe that a uniform helps to instill discipline and unity, but is that a proven factor?
I subscribe to that motion as a teacher myself. I've seen situations where on the days when you request children to put on civvies, then discipline goes out through the window. That day you'll have challenges in just maintaining discipline. I really believe in that. And I believe that when children are in school uniform, wherever you find them, whether in taxi ranks, on bus stops and all that, if they're in school uniform, they tend to behave much better when they're in a school uniform, because they are easily identifiable, and you can even identify the school that they come from. So it does help in instilling discipline.
I want to point your direction there to the map
I would like to
there.
talk to you about this, sir, because, you know, it's easy to give our own feelings, but where's the science that says uniforms instill discipline? We have some of the worst disciplined schools in South Africa that wear uniforms. Even in prison we wear uniforms and there's no discipline. These are the countries in green where we also see children perform the best in schools. We have the best schooling systems, especially in these kinds of countries, best in the world. No uniforms. I did matric in Germany. No uniform. children performed the best because they were handed the responsibility. And when you talk about neatness and the like, yes, you still have to dress in a neat way, in an affordable way, and so forth. But the idea that a uniform instills discipline is fundamentally flawed and definitely not backed up by science. Your response, sir?
My response is I'm not baking it on science, I'm baking it on experience.
Your personal experience?
Yes, my personal experience. One other thing that I want to bring on board in terms of uniform here is that probably the countries that you are quoting, the majority of them are countries that are rich in nature. And when you bring in the issue of uniform, you are trying to bring in, I would say uniform is an equalization type of a process. It bridges the gap between the rich and the poor.
No, it hides inequality. That's what it does. That's what you should say, sir. Uniforms hide inequality. That's at the heart of it. But surely we can't have a system where one man's experience, and you've never worked in any of these schools where there are no uniforms, am I right?
I wouldn't agree with you.
You've never worked in these, have you, sir?
No, I haven't worked with them, but I've worked in a lot of poverty-stricken schools. What I'm trying to say to you is that where there is uniform in schools, there is some sort of equalization there because the children then are dressed the same way. Where you don't have uniform, that's where you find children that come from rich families having designer clothes and others don't have. It then puts pressure on those that don't have. And the problem with those that don't have is that they don't even have much of the clothes to change on a daily basis. So uniform allows them to be able to be at school and be looked the same way as the rest of the children in the classroom and continue to have something to come up with.
I have a different view of you, sir, than you, and I respect your opinion, but I'll maintain my different view because I've made the experience. I've made the experience in a different school without uniforms and the freedom that you have, the responsibility that you have. Children grow up a lot faster and they take responsibility much more. But that was my experience, as you say. So I'll agree to disagree with you.
Now, if we look at the situation, having kids wear normal clothes in school, you've indicated that from your own experience that you see that kids are not disciplined. But is there perhaps a compromise where you would have, because some schools do include Civics Day on a Friday perhaps where kids go, and you say that does not work?
No, if they do it occasionally, it does work. It does give children at least a day of freedom and so on. But I'm saying the pressure from the have-nots is too tremendous. And if that was to happen on a daily basis, children wouldn't have something to put up. I mean, we're talking about children that have 1 or 2 trousers for the rest of the year. Then where would they get these clothes to come to school and change on a daily basis? So that's where uniform closes this gap between the haves and the have-nots.
But if that is the case, there is still this issue of uniform becoming unaffordable. How do we bridge that gap, and what is the department doing to make sure that parents are not being charged exorbitant fees?
I think that's where the Competition Commission is coming in. What makes uniform to be unaffordable is that people tend to have contracts with particular suppliers and they have these sole rights to provide uniform to particular schools. Now, in order to make it cheaper, open up the market, let the uniform be available everywhere. Whoever wants to supply a school, then a parent will have to decide where this uniform is obtainable. And that will make the price of uniform come cheaper.
Is a uniform not perhaps the answer, where you have a white shirt and a grey pants and that's it?
Well, the argument here is that you might begin to have schools that will talk about their own tradition and their own trademark and want to maintain particular colors in order to be identifiable and all that. But they can have. But key here is who decides on school uniform? And if we can respond to that question, and our answer is it is the community, it is the parents there who are led by the governing bodies. So from the department point of view, we're saying schools need to consult broadly with the schooling community and the parents to decide on a uniform that is affordable and where this uniform can be found. And in that way, they'll be making the idea of uniform become cheaper.
Thank you so much for your your time and joining us here in studio.
You're welcome.
That was Mr. James Ndlebe. He is from the Department of Basic Education, the Director of Education Management and Governance in Schools. Right, Scott.